Alright, welcome to day 50, Saturday of Persona 5 Dailies. It is Palace time. Oh boy, I've got my minty green tea with me, ready to go. We are in it for the long haul, folks. Man, it's gonna be a long day today, but I have plenty of notes once we are inside the palace. You notice in the background. Do you remember the guy we usually talk to in the hall, and the stalker, as they stroll right past us? It's a good detail. It's something I noticed the first time, and like, you know, I just thought that was neat. The fact that they have this continued storyline through each arc as a new section of her continued, like, not good obsession. It's not good. We have some rumors going around talking about Monday, which will be the cleanup event, which I'm sure some of you will remember from the trailers as a day where we get to interact with Kasumi a bit more. So yeah, we haven't got to see too much of her just yet, and really the distance between each individual interaction has been relatively far and few between. It's something I hope to see change after that point, and I think it will. Currently I have today to help me through this whole long spiel. It's a green tea with mint from Harney and Sons. They are the store. They're based in Middleton, New York, but you can order tea from them online. And honestly, I'd say it's relatively affordable. And so far, I like what they got. Originally, I was getting tea from them because I wanted to try hojicha, which is kind of hard to find much of anywhere else. For those who are unfamiliar, which I was for a long time, hojicha is basically, whenever they make green tea, they typically only take the leaves and then grind those down. But as a way of reducing the amount of waste from those plants, they then decided to take the stems, roast those over charcoal, and then make that into a tea itself. And the product is actually really good. It's kind of, I would describe it as a mix between like coffee and tea. Certainly a lot lighter than coffee, but a lot of that sort of earthiness and a bit of nuttiness too. Really good. If you like if you like the strength of coffee, it's not quite there, but if you think you would like tea if it was just a little bit stronger, it definitely is stronger than most normal teas. Recommend that if you do decide to make it, make sure to boil water for it. Typically you don't want to have boiling water for your tea. It tends to destroy it because it's just too hot. But for hojicha, because you are steeping roasted grounds, and we see here Makoto actually flanks us on our way to the palace. That was my cat jumping off my desk. Which is kind of cool. I actually never do. I wonder if that's new. Yeah, she's like basically just keeping an eye on us and likely tracking us down to our potential hideout. Here is a yet unnamed character, yet to be named character, also catching us on the way here. I'm guessing she didn't do it on purpose. Makoto definitely did, and she is expecting the others in our party to follow suit. Yeah, things are winding up. One of the problems from working from home all the time is if you have pets, they can be very needy all of a sudden, because now instead of you just not being there, now they act like you're ignoring them all the time, and they don't listen, do they? Ule. I have 2 cats, and I love them to death, but one of them really doesn't like to listen at all, and knocks over my electronics. Shithead. Yeah, we are headed in. So we have a few things to check off the list before we get in there. Actually, I guess it's just going to be this cutscene, and then we will be on it.
ダヴィンチかな。
ボツ。狐の面に妙な尻尾だな。よし。油揚げだ。
Certainly went for the flattering name, didn't he?
オッケーしやがった。
決まりだな。油揚げ。
やめろっつーの。ジョーカー、なんか別のない？ジョーカーと被るな。なら、フォックス。これでどう？
悪くねえな。
どうだ、フォックス。
別に構わん。
決まりだ。行くぜ。
それから今回からスタメンはジョーカーに決めてもらうことにしようぜ。スタメン？最初のメンバーってこと？フォックスが加わって戦力としちゃ申し分ないが、大人数は目立って動きにくい。今までのことも考えると最初のメンバーは4人、あとはバックアップに回った方が無難だ。
だからってリーダーはスタメンから外せないだろ。
だからジョーカーに残り3人を選んでもらうのさ。
バックアップはどうすればいい？ここで待っているのか？
いやいや、つかず離れずで一緒に行動しておいた方がいいだろう。スタメンは言ってみれば前衛だ。いつでも交代できた方がいいからな。じゃあチーム編成は頼んだぞ、ジョーカー。
Alright. So with that, we can kind of get started with many of the notes that I've wrangled together for this palace. If I happen to run through all of my notes, that's fine. There's still plenty to talk about in this dungeon. Here we have Goemon right front center. The thing you'll notice immediately about his design is that he is very colorful. In fact, I would say a lot more colorful than some of the other personas. It's not to say that they aren't given a degree of, they aren't incredibly stylish. All of them are incredibly stylish, but his in particular incorporates a lot of very dramatic, very saturated colors and many different patterns. Whereas Arsene is dominantly red, white and black, and Carmine is similarly so with accents of pink overall. And Captain Kidd is not predominantly colorful at all. He has a large, well, he is defined by large shapes. His color is a tad more muted than the others, but Goemon is incredibly colorful, especially with the accents of the light blue representing his elements as the ice persona in our team. I'm surprised actually more of that light blue isn't incorporated into the rest of his design, and I think it's just a matter of like presentation. He would have been too gaudy, so instead we have a much darker blue that serves the bulk of his silhouette, with reds and a sort of a pink, red, violet mixture as the accent for the pants as well, creating a very definite line between his bottom and his top of his character. These sorts of segmentations are really important to creating good character design, because they give you a greater sense of where they are in terms of posing at any given time. Very defined silhouettes also allow for 3D space to be a lot easier to note. And so you can see this a lot more easily with Arsene due to his much simpler color palette, because parts of him tend to be broken up pretty dramatically by sort of the black undercoat and the white frills of his outfit, as well as sharp, dramatic lines. I dropped my tag into my cup. Ah, hot tea. Yeah. But this is something that is true of a lot of character design, and something I always consider younger artists to take into mind when they make their characters. You want clear definitions between large parts of the body. With realistic designs, it can be a bit more difficult because you want to avoid, you know, putting all your characters in swimsuits, so the definition from their hips become more defined. Though this obviously hasn't stopped a lot of game developers from doing so for less scrupulous reasons. It does become an interesting conversation of, though, is it technically good design in those cases? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And sometimes yes, but come on. But no, something, Goemon's design is one of my favorites in this game for those reasons, really. Despite his complexity, he is still easy to read and steeped with a lot of interesting context and flavor to him overall. Don't mind me as I figure out all of the fusions that I want to take into this palace before I get things going. This is going to be a big one. Ame no Uzume will be a strong persona for me for most of this palace, if and just in part because she has a bunch of room clearing spells. I don't recommend you lean too heavily on multi-hit attacks just because of the SP cost by itself. SP is a very important resource in this game, and it's easy to run out. That being said, if you're playing this game normally with all the SP items and the SPT sieves and whatever, you don't really have to worry about this too much. It is fairly important for the boss we see later in the game, and I will explain why when we get there. But yeah, I actually ended up doing this palace without using any SP items whatsoever, and from what I'm seeing so far, it's going to be possible to do it for most, if not all, the game, with the biggest hurdles definitely being the bosses. A few bosses in particular I recall from the previous game requiring just a lot of SP to get through completely. Unless we're able to utilize baton pass a lot more in this game on bosses than previously, it's going to be tough. But you know, we'll keep going at it until we get there, and we always have our ace in the hole in the back if we need to. If we need to drop a Soma eventually, we'll do it, because at the end of the day, I have to get these episodes done. So it's really a challenge for myself. If I decide to play through this again, it's definitely going to be a much heavier one. So I did notice that apparently you can fuse Kaguya normally without being without actually just picking her up from the DLC. She is able to be fused just in a regular lineup. And this is something we'll see actually with a few other DLC personas. I don't know if the Picaros have that same effect, because Picaros tend to be much stronger versions of their standard ones. So anyway, back to some Goemon and Yusuke facts. So, something of note for Goemon, for Yusuke in particular, is that he's actually a reference to a rather prestigious Ukuye artist. Ukuye is a style of painting, of artwork. This man also worked on woodblock prints, which is basically a way of you putting, how do I put this? You develop paintings by painting the wood and then using that as a way of printing the image onto the paper, and it creates this unique overlay for and texture for paintings. The man's name was Utamaro Kirigawa, sharing the last name with Yusuke. Incidentally, in adulthood, Utamaro would actually go by the name Yusuke. Thus, Yusuke is less of a indirect reference and more of verbatim the same name. Kirigawa is also well known for his portraits of beautiful women. Also known in its more official term as Bijinga, which is Bijin-ga, in case you want to look that up. So, you can see a pretty clear line drawn to another historical figure. I think I'll actually be running with these outfits throughout most of the game. I usually was switching up a lot of the songs and costumes throughout, but personally I landed on one that I liked quite a bit. So let me know if you guys are playing this, if you found your favorites. I really like this design for Joker. It's very loud and obnoxious and stands out ostensibly, but also he has the gadget on his arm, which I actually don't know a lot about. This game, I believe, is from the precursor to Persona, Shin Megami Tensei If. So, but the song that accompanies it is kind of perfect for this. The question is, do I avoid this guy? Yes, I do. After previously running into the Shikioji last time, I do not want to spend the limited resources I do have on dealing with this guy before I've finished the dungeon. We continue to see this peacock motif sprinkled throughout this entire palace. I believe the peacock motif particularly is meant to represent sort of a heavenly quality. The Kingaku, or heavenly peacock, is noted as a figure of heavenly divinity of good fortune, and good fortune certainly fits with the disgustingly gold, gaudy aesthetic here. But also, probably a bit more obviously that I didn't think of until now, was the concept of vanity, and how peacocks are often seen as being vain creatures, with the strutting around and the giant presenting feathers. Fun fact, did you know peacocks scream like people? It's terrifying. If you've never encountered it, be glad. It's the last sound you would expect to come out of a bird. It's something terrible, let me tell you that. Also, I wanted to just give a shout out, say right now, because of the length of this episode and because of the time constraints that I have today, I won't be able to edit out a lot of my uhs and a lot of my tics. I do have Tourette's, so I do the thing where like blow through my nose. Thankfully, a lot of my other tics are visual, so you can't see them. But I apologize in advance if some of those end up becoming a bit distracting. Man, it's been hard to get these all out in a timely manner, but this has certainly been the way to go about it. Like, I really do want to put more individual bits into this where I can, but finding the time is really tricky. I'm curious if... So I noticed that it says SP reduced by Frigid Bloodbond. And that happens 100% of the time as long as you have that trait. But I'm wondering if it can activate congruently with On's ability, which is anytime you use a magic ability, there's a percent chance of decreasing that SP. So far from what I've seen, no, they do not stack. So that is certainly worth keeping in account. I thought that by stacking those you could get potentially a broken combo, but thus far that has not been the case. That being said, you can certainly get passive stacked onto one character that can cause that exponential decrease of SP consumption, which will be important for the challenge that I've laid out for myself personally. I really like this outfit for On specifically because it allows you to have pants without having a giant like titty window for the outfit. Like, sure, her design looks good, but titty window. It's a bit goofy. That's all I'm saying. It seems goofy to me, especially with the tail and the hippie pose. I mean the hip pose, not hippie pose. That's a very different idea. Fairly lightly minted tea. Good. That item we just got is essentially a pocket Hirukaja. It allows us to add an attack buff and its accompanying item, a defense buff to any character. Something we might take use of much later on in the game when SP becomes much more of a difficult thing to manage. Because the ability to actually maintain what SP you have becomes exponentially harder and harder as costs get larger and larger. Just because of like the nature of if you're subtracting 2 from a 4 from the cost of 50 so many times versus subtracting 10 from the cost of 50, like, that is a huge gap. Being able to use something 20 times versus being able to use something 10 times is a big deal.
だがルート確保するためにはセキュリティの解除は必要なステップだ。ここは押し通るしかないと思うぜ。
So, because I have a lot more notes to go through. So the biggest one I want to note is that how Madarame's forging of the Sayuris, the closet full of Sayuris, actually might be a reference to the theft of the Mona Lisa, which I'm sure some of you might have heard about in your art history class or just in the news a long time ago. But it has been a big deal. The Mona Lisa has been stolen a few times, and they have tried. Before, by the way, previously this boss fight was just Yoji, but they have changed it, and probably for good reason. Yeah, which, you know, Sayuri itself might be a reference directly to Mona Lisa as well. Because right there we did see On's ability go off there, but we didn't see On's ability with Frigid Bloodline also going off. Albeit they might just have shown one that had both happen, but I didn't get the chance to actually focus directly on how much SP I lost there, so back to Mona Lisa. So the actual Mona Lisa was used by critics to have gained its worldwide recognition. Sorry about that. Largely thanks to its theft versus its artistic acumen. It is often viewed as an amazing piece of the Renaissance era and probably one of the most famous paintings in the world, but its theft made such a huge contribution to it being well known globally because of the sheer incredulity of the fact that A, that it was stolen, but B, what happened next. So Madarame's scam selling the forgeries as the stolen original to unsuspecting buyers is actually a reference to a theory that was posited in 1932 by Carl Decker, a journalist at the time, who posited that the theft of Mona Lisa in 1911 was part of a larger scheme masterminded by an Argentine con man, Eduardo de Valvierno. If I pronounced that incorrectly, I'm sorry. According to Decker, this man commissioned 6 copies of the painting, paying several men to steal the original, including the Louvre employee Vincenzo Perugia. Again, probably pronouncing that wrong. I apologize. He would eventually commit the robbery. Once news of the crime went public, the Argentine man sold each copy to a pre-selected buyer who believed the original was stolen for them. Essentially, making out like a fucking bandit. I'm not sure what happened to that man next. I would have to look. That is interesting, though. I wonder if there is any media on that. But that is what we know for now. Madarame, I did mention previously that Madarame actually shares a lot of motifs with Toyotama Hideyoshi, who was at one point the ruling regents of all of Japan after Oda Nobunaga was killed prematurely in his desire to unify Japan. Ultimately, he would be the 3rd person to serve as essentially ruler of Japan before, I believe, the Edo period would come into fact, and then largely be ruled by various shoguns. Yeah, the man was a commoner, illiterate for most of his life, and elevated to the ruler of Japan by the death of Nobunaga. And he is predominantly known for basically surviving off the goodwill and talents of others to gain his station, which isn't unlike Madarame stealing the future of his students and surviving off of the credit he gained from stealing their art. This is significant for the sake of Yusuke's persona as well, Goemon, who is most well known for his attempted assassination of Hideyoshi. Again, just want to point out, this music is so funky. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I've been recording with a handheld microphone for the duration of quarantine, so unfortunately I've had a lot of rattling and moving. I don't know where the rattling could possibly be coming from. But it always finds a way to pop up. I am baffled. So, it certainly make editing a bit more annoying. This song too, by the way. It is great. So yeah, from what I can tell, that only activated, that we spent two SB there, so that was just for digital buying. So let's keep an eye out for whenever it mentions On's ability coming up and see if we end up spending only one. If that's the case, that is a huge contribution to my challenge run, so I really, really want that to happen. Also, I've noticed, I noticed later on in this run that Disaster Shadows actually end up taking more damage than average Shadows, which simply makes them feel a lot less dangerous, and in fact they're more of a disaster to the other enemy as dangerous. The thing about Disaster Shadows is that the more damage you do to them, the more damage they do to everybody else. They tend to do damage relative to the amount of damage you do, albeit not the same amount. Albeit there might be a difference of like defenses versus that. Defenses versus your own attack versus like their standard attack, so I'm not sure. It is likely calculable because the way Atlas tend to do their programming tends to be relatively simplistic. It's not the really complicated arithmetic of Pokemon's catch rate and all of that. Seriously, look up that algorithm. That is high-level calculus shit. It's insane. Or damage calculations that, say, FromSoft does for their games. Some very complicated estimations there where you have like stat accumulation, drop-offs, and tackling defenses versus poise versus stances, all that. None of that is in this. Damage tends to be calculated very linearly, so if we do pay attention, we could probably actually figure out how exactly damage from our attack translates to damage from these After Shadows explode. Anyway, that was a long ramble about numbers. So I wanted to take a second shot at Shikioji here because we had to check out the front of this anyway. From what I can tell, from what I know right now, Freya is the only way to hurt Shikioji. Shikioji knows 4 incredibly significant weaknesses: physical, gun, which are kind of a big deal by themselves, but also light and dark, which means that you can't use instant kill moves on him either. This also makes him one of the best personas to solo if you're planning on going through this game, upgrading like just one persona as you go. As you continue through, you will gain the ability to power personas a lot more, and because of his really amazing spread and the fact that he is more of a physical-based persona, he is a really good one to have on your team. Also great if you happen to want to build a persona particularly for choosing bosses and mementos to get money. And piano takes it. That's when it gets good. Alright, so I mentioned before the sort of the vanity that's inherent with this dungeon. As is acknowledged by what we'll see with the will seeds, as well as with the achievement for beating this palace, the sin, of course, that is attached to Madarame is vanity, and this continues the trend of naming off of the 7 deadly sins, or more accurately, with the inclusion of vanity, the 8 vices traditionally listed prior to the declaration of Pope Gregory the Great, who was kind of a big deal at one point, basically defining the Christian sins as they've been known for the last several centuries. But yes, previously it was 8 vices, including which had split the concept of vanity and pride into 2 different concepts. Actually, vanity was originally called vainglory, which likely estimates that vanity is simply a corruption of this word, having been reduced by colloquialism to reduce the amount of the amount of sounds in the word to make it easier to say in common parlance. This isn't uncommon, by the way. This is something that does happen a lot, and this can be most easily seen with things like conjunctions. You know, saying can't instead of cannot, or saying ain't instead of saying many other things. Is not, will not, won't not, does not. Yeah, the reduction of the amount of sounds in a word to make it easier for common parlance is a very common thing and probably led to vainglory becoming vanity. But the definition of that, of course, being the excessive desire for pride and fame, which is something we can definitely see Madarame being, could be accused of. The only sad thing about not having him in his regular costume is, fun fact, his little tail. He actually wags his little tail when he gets excited during this chest animation. I'm sure someone was really happy to know that, so I just wanted to share it. You can definitely see that the paintings are important, but we're having a bit of trouble getting there because I forgot we just have to go around here. This area has also been pretty overall like changed from its original inclusion in Persona 5. And as far as I can tell, honestly, it feels like more and more things have changed in the palace design after the initial palace. And part of that might just be because the original palace of Kamoshida's was actually considered one of the better palace designs of the whole game. And so likely they simply wanted to shore up weaknesses in the palace design they saw from the last game, or to address potential concerns from fans. If this is true, we will likely see this most with the fifth palace, which is largely considered the worst one. And if you've played this game, you know which one I'm talking about. You definitely know which one I'm talking about. So moving on with our Goemon facts. Remember how I mentioned that Goemon failed in his attempt to assassinate the then leader of Japan, Hideyoshi? Well, a crime like that doesn't get off with a slap on the wrist. As is referenced in one of the classroom days that you may or may not remember, Goemon was executed by, no fucking joke, being boiled alive in a pot of water. It's also rumored that his son was sentenced with them, such that he would have no heir when he died, to either continue his lineage or swear revenge, which isn't necessarily without precedent in feudal Japan. But that his son's life was saved by Goemon holding his son above the boiling water. However, this is neither certain nor substantiated by historical sources. More so that it's likely a dramatized interpretation from kabuki plays that had been depicting him. Which, you know, he is definitely a famous figure in kabuki plays. However, his boiling alive might actually be a reference to in game, quite morbidly, due to his weakness of fire, which is pretty bleak. The precedent of this actually existing in the previous Persona games as well, as in, I believe, Persona 4, one of the characters has the persona of Joan of Arc, or Joan d'Arc, who had also another weakness to fire, and if you remember history, she was burned at the stake. So, yeah. History has a whole lot of bummers. That is for sure.
うちら最強じゃない？
よし手応えねえな。
Finding out that the fast heal actually just affects status effects is kind of unfortunate. Ultimately not the most useful application of it, just because of how often we're trying to avoid that in the first place. It can be situationally effective in cases where you can't avoid it, such as like boss fights, which we will certainly see at some point in this game. But given that you can also get fast heal as a ability that is a persona ability, and because it's situational, it's often better just to have it on a specific persona to avoid those conditions. But admittedly, I've actually seen people play this game in a much different way than I have gone about it. Look at that design, though; it really is great. Pompadour is really what puts it together. It really is like a sort of generational effect with him. And I'll take back some of what I said about Captain Kit. He actually is a much more colorful character than I expected. And Zoro actually is more so the monochromatic one, though again with very, very defined shapes to his character. That might exactly have been why he had such a tiny head and such a large top body and such a small lower body, as to make him more well-defined. I'll also let you guys know, this is actually one of the shorter dungeons that I think is in the game, with the first one being a fairly torturous 4 hours long. But I also recalled in my first playthrough it being much, much longer, albeit in my first playthrough I was also a lot more fusion happy, because I hadn't really had any definite idea about what fusions to prepare for. So anyway, I had to stop recording for a few hours there, so you will see the cut happen. While I'm waiting around for myself to get back moving, I'm back moving. Good. Let's keep going on the list. Now, I showed you again Goemon's design, and something you might have noticed, certainly something that I have mentioned in the past, was the branding that's on the side part of his coat that reads 5 and in Roman numerals IXICAVA. And if you're trying to count this, don't. That's not what's going on there. This is actually a possible reference to two things. One a bit clearer and one a bit more speculative. The first is to the Latinized name, which was I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but it's basically those letters again, but like Ishikawa Goemon, which, yeah, so it's just a direct reference to his name. But the 5, you might ask? Okay. So in Japanese, the romanization of the word 5 is go, because that's how it's pronounced. Ichi, ni, san, yon, go. So there you go. But it's also possibly referencing the fact that Yusuke is also the 5th party member to join your team, which might entirely be happenstance, but it is a nice little piece of trivia still. There's actually a lot to be said about his design in terms of how Japanese it is versus various other characters. And I think there's actually a there's a deeper reason to that I was thinking before I started recording today. So I mentioned before how the original concept of this game was for a road trip around the world, visiting various parts of like Egypt, Europe, Americas, chasing around a villain across the world. Well, the reason for use case distinct Japanese inspirations might actually be this particular effect, where he was to be encountered in Japan, whereas other people were going to find the personas in these other countries as we go through. And we'll actually see this most obviously represented once we get to the fourth dungeon. Sorry, the fourth palace. And I apologize in advance if you can hear it. There has been construction outside my house for the last 2 months, and I've had to stop and start recording so many times over the last few weeks, and it is so frustrating. So hopefully you can't quite hear that. I really hope so. And you can't win. I either record in the day when there's construction, or I record at night when people are racing by for some reason and revving their cars because everyone has to show off to the guys who stand on their stoops all day. I never get that. Just hanging out outside, yelling at strangers. It's weird behavior, but I don't know. I'm an introvert, so I like to do as much of the opposite of that as I can. But yeah, Goemon's design is like so incredibly Japanese, with the kabuki style face mask, the giant ornamental pipe known as a kiseru, which is a traditional Japanese pipe. Those like very iconic tengu sandals with the one little spoke in the middle that are high-rised. The coat, the Shinto style wrapping around his waist, which designated not just like holy areas such as like mountains or holy rocks that are used for like seals, but also religious figures such as Yamabushi monks back in previous times. You'll notice times where I kind of stop for a long time, and I do intend to edit these out if I get the chance to. I really do hope so. But the reason for this is just having to record for about 4 to 5, ultimately end up like about 9 hours straight that day. You know, I have to take care of things around the house, and so every now and again I just become a loading screen. And yeah, I do recommend anyone who is interested in these characters, please go check them out. Either a good place to honestly start is Wikipedia. Obviously, Wikipedia should never be your final source, but Wikipedia does have a lot of links to notable sources, either to books that are so Everything Japanese by McGraw-Hill, which is a very well-known publisher of school books, albeit I have my exemptions with the 3 large corporations that basically hold all of those together. McGraw-Hill can be a little bit suspect at times, but in general, being able to jump from one resource to another is still positive. There are, like you see the Shadow Warrior from Sterling Publishing Company, Warriors of Medieval Japan from Osprey Publishing, and you get names, you get dates, you get everything you need to be able to find these sorts of actual proper resources through Wikipedia. And that's something that I learned when I started researching these things on my own, as well as like later on actually when someone brought it up in one of my later papers for college while I was doing Japanese studies, is that finding these sorts of like independent resources can be really tricky, but Wikipedia is a good place to start looking for where these can come through, but also to find, because finding published resources can be a bit tricky given that it is made to be somewhat inherently obstinate. Now, you should always, of course, be mindful. One of these appears to be Goemon Wrestlers Database Cage Match, which I believe is fitting more so under the in popular culture tab of Goemon's page. So just be mindful of that, of course. That should go without saying, but sometimes people slip up, you know, it happens. This is actually how I found many of the resources I brought up, and it can be a really good rabbit hole to fall down to if you have a spare few hours where you just want to learn something. The thing that's really cool is that once you start seeing some of these connections, you'll see a lot of these connections, especially in Japanese media. Anime in particular really loves referencing old Japanese ninja, samurai, shoguns and whatnot. Really like referencing a lot of folklore, and naturally, of course, like we see how many different versions of Christian mythology in Western media. How many different versions of demons of the devil or Orpheus? How many different versions of wizards and unicorns and dragons, especially dragons. God, why did I not say dragons first? You forgot that the tentacle just sort of whacks you out. I thought it led to the next painting, because the transition mark that I recalled just wasn't there, so I just thought, oh, I'll give it a shot. It didn't work out though. Also, I'm sure this is a question that will come up eventually. Part of the reason why I do a lot of my, why I play this game in Japanese originally, before I actually knew a lot of Japanese. I still say I know some Japanese and a lot of Japanese, but anyway, the reason why I do that was in part because they have a lot of call and response whenever you use your abilities, or whenever like any sort of notification happens. And in English, it can become fucking unbearable. It's one of the biggest problems I have with this game. But however, in Japanese, because I'm not as attuned to it, I kind of like naturally ignore a lot of the background noise. And it just becomes more so a part of the background, which sounds redundant, but whatever. I'm not editing this. Too much to do. Yeah, so honestly, in that respect, I do recommend it for that. I do think the American cast do a great job. Like, especially my boy Mobius. That man has done amazing work for a long time. Actually becoming the voice of the Super Smash announcer ever since, I think, Brawl. It's either Brawl or Smash 4 where he started becoming that, and he returned his role in Super Smash Ultimate. And so in that game, he incidentally plays two different characters, which is the announcer and also Joker. That's really cool. So props to that guy, man. He is the dopest. Also, he just seems like a genuinely cool guy. Like, I don't know him personally, but you know, everything I can take from his interactions is he's a swell dude. Here we see a lot of Madarame's inner thoughts being sort of broadcasted as these paintings, further contextualizing the degree to which his desires have been warped. I do mention again, though, that it's tricky to take this as a full recognition of who Madarame is. Just the part of Madarame that he refuses to acknowledge as himself. Which is ultimately why it's so far disconnected from him and in a palace of its own, protected and locked away from other people. Is that by refusing to acknowledge that part of himself, he has basically rejected it and pushed it as far away from his can. Does he continue to act in the way he does without acknowledging that his actions are his own? Really acknowledging the reality of his actions. That what he is doing is not simply harmful, but outright villainous. Here we enter another part that has been significantly changed for the sake of this palace. This makes me really look forward to the next palace coming up, which originally was actually one of my least favorite, in part because the first time I went through this game is I had been using the SP adhesives, which later on into the game sort of balance out a bit more, but for the third palace basically made it like a non-entity. You just walk through it and call it a day. It was unfortunate, so I'm hoping to have a much better experience for the third palace this time around. Really glad to see Confusion work again. Oh. It is certainly that time of the year, isn't it? Anyone else suffering from allergies during all of this? It's really awful to have allergies outside right now, because everyone looks at you like you're the actual fucking plague. Which is understandable. People are very concerned right now, and I'm not disacknowledging that at all. But man, dust and pollen gets huge. Like someday, like I think it's a dander around here. I don't know. I've always had very inconsistent allergies. I'm curious if he actually does have a line for every single possible persona in this game. If so, that is a lot of dialogue for one guy. Because I think there's something like 200 personas in this game. I could be wrong. I went ahead to check and see if I had any nuke consumable items. Forgot that he is immune to dark there. Certainly just wasted that straw doll. Was hoping to freeze him there. Hopefully it didn't work out. Now I'm in an even worse position because now I don't have Freya on my side. Normally it would be a good idea to get him out of the way and be able to technical him, but it also means that he would be able to heal by the time he got to his turn. So it's really a matter of, do I actually get a proper return on it? Taunt on him is actually pretty great, just because of the fact that he nulls anything you throw at him. Finally hit his target. I think from now on I will also probably be picking up whenever I go to the soda machine, I'll be picking up those HP items as quick heals to avoid having to heal like small bits of lost health. Because sometimes having an extra 20 health can be the difference between getting 2-shot and not getting 2-shot. And they have also significantly decreased the strength of physical attacks in this area, specifically by getting rid of access to Swift Strike at this point, I believe. Originally, if I recall correctly, Shikioji had Swift Strike, which was a light or minuscule attack that hit about 3 or 4 times, which meant that if you had a attack buff on you or charge on you, you did radically more damage by an upsettingly large margin. We are almost halfway through this palace so far. I actually ran through the notes I had available here. So yeah, I can always find more. Honestly, when it comes to Goemon, he is an incredibly predominant character in Japanese media. Several kabuki plays depicting him as Kimon Gosen in the series. In a lot of different animes and games. He is, I think, most well known for his the character Goemon Ishikawa, the 13th in Lupin the 3rd, which, as I mentioned before, is an incredible. I forgot that he is resistant to bullets. But yeah, Lupin the 3rd is an incredibly popular series, been going since the 1970s in Japan. So I've noticed that once I got to this palace, I think that the overpowered nature of guns has definitely leveled to a point that's a lot more reasonable. While I was grinding, I found that they're still pretty powerful, but there's also, I think, a lot of balancing in that too. I certainly empty accept a lot more in this game than I did previously. Before, it was a lot more about conserving what ammo you use to a very finite source. And so, I think that sense of conservation has been lost, but I think overall it has been a good quality of life improvement to the game overall. I still feel flow is a bit ridiculous to give you this early in the game, but it certainly makes using physical attacks a lot more of a nominal inclusion. Physical attacks were widely considered to be somewhat underpowered for the previous game, though I tend to disagree because the inclusion of the strike at this point meant that you could do an astounding amount of damage to certain bosses. It certainly trivialized the 3rd Palace's boss for me, personally. Yeah, notice there that despite Masai not actually hitting multiple targets, the fact that that ability is meant to target multiple targets initiated the ability Mighty Boost, which adds 20% damage to abilities that target multiple enemies. And so more so it's attached to the ability itself and not to the amount of targets it actually targets. I heard this sparkling, so it got me really curious. There we actually saw for a moment the a preview of a puzzle we will see later in this dungeon with the blue and red Sayori peeking out of the paintings. I noticed with the drop, so I wanted to be sure I wasn't missing something before dropping down here, potentially not being able to get back up immediately. And there we see our first will seed. is now close, just around the corner. There we go, we see more of the theories.
Oh? Nah.
あれはまだらめの石か。いただいていこう。どうやら
Beads are a really strong item to keep hold of. Definitely worth hanging on to for specifically like boss fights and more difficult encounters. Now we see the first will seed that has been made available to us. Green Vanity Stone. We hear this nice remix of this track thus far. Gets a nice bit of the clock in the background.
よく聞け。
As the sound of it is warped. Yeah, I accidentally skipped Yusuke's line there. The light tatami drum.
マジかよ。
Really just a great mix thrown to the middle. Also, this part of the dungeon is just really, really cool. Its design is awesome. And this is always satisfying. Part of me felt like I should have waited for Yusuke to get a shot in there, but he doesn't have Mabufu yet. He just has Bufu, so unfortunately he gets this turn. Sorry Yusuke, like I said, you would have been a wasted use. But admittedly, I don't actually end up using him a lot in the dungeon, so he ends up with a lot more SP than anyone else later on.
よし
この程度俺一人で十分だったな。
研ぎ澄ませ
なんということだ。
This again continues the theme of as we grow closer to the distortions, closer to the source of the distortion, the palace itself becomes more distorted and less connected to reality. And this is a continuing theme that I just love seeing. I love this sort of like abstract geometry, geography to designs and really seeing how it works and how it interconnects itself together. I feel like this one's pretty obvious. I don't know, guys. Maybe you guys should just be paying more attention.
Oh, これ でも
Quite the eye for detail. It's literally just, it's the wrong color. Like, Ryuji could have noticed that. There are a few other ones that are like a bit more like particular, like harder to like notice, and I'll give them that. But like that one is not it. That one is too obvious. Also, you'll notice very briefly you see that the security level picture has actually changed from the blacked out version to now the more detailed version. Before we meet the palace owner, we actually always see that blacked out version that leaves the identity of the palace owner a bit more vague, whereas once it's defined, it's also accompanied by an item.
Yes.
Now you'll notice in the first one, he goes from being a shadowed figure to King Kamishita with the medal. And what we found is that at the end, the treasure that we collected was the medal. This time we notice that Madarame has a painting with him. So, take that as a hint, and continue forward. Initially, when I came to this room, I actually didn't notice the tearaway at the wall. I was focused on grabbing some extra treasures. But yeah, from this distance, it's actually really hard to notice immediately what the actual change is. And so zooming in is kind of important. Go ahead and see at home how quickly it takes you to figure out what the difference is in these various paintings. It's pretty obvious once you notice it.
No.
It's actually a good amount that can be said about the quality of this painting as it is, and like the actual actionable lines in the flow from one point of it to the next. Ultimately, like with seeing individual parts taken out, it becomes a lot clearer as to what they're doing right with its creation. It was this moment when I realized, oh wait, I might have missed something, I should go back. And also the likelihood that the one in there was most definitely the correct one. By the way, if you choose the incorrect one, you will be ambushed by shadows, in case you're curious. Another soul drop, which typically I'd be really excited about, and it's always nice to get them. They feel valuable, but like I said, I'm going as long as I can without using a single SP item. Because, to be honest, if I can say one thing that's positive about the changes they did make, is that while it tends to undermine, in my opinion, the balance of SP in this game, it also creates an opportunity to play the game in this new way. And that's always a take I try to take with these kinds of games, is finding a way to optimize my own playstyle to a way that I make the most of the resources I have. Items are always kind of tricky because they create a variability of when you decide to use them based on the knowledge that you do have. Over the scope of a 2-hour long game, you can end up in situations where if you're largely relying on items to accomplish goals, you can reach a point where you either have to grind sort of incessantly, or you're simply left with no recourse as to simply change the way you go about things. This is something I see with like no sphere grid runs of Final Fantasy X, which is a really, really cool run to watch, by the way, because again, something it shows you is how well that game is balanced. The fact that you could run through essentially at level 1 and beat the game. It is possible to beat the game without putting a single point into the sphere grid. And while obviously you can't stay at level 1 with your personas here and do it, you can beat this game with using just the original persona Arsene. You can beat it with one character, albeit you are going to have a hell of a time for the first few dungeons, but after, I believe, the second or third dungeon, once you have mementos available to you, it is possible to begin min-maxing personas to the point where you can solo this game. But also, yeah, I always look for ways of encountering these games and trying to find new ways of playing them. But I'll let Morgana talk for a while.
おい、
あそこか。もやもやしてない？今はな。予告を出してまだらめに奪われると認識させりゃ、お宝が実体化してヤッホーこんにちはよ。
どんな姿だろうな。
さてな、自画像とかじゃねえの？
まだらめの現実をここまで歪ませた根源か。
で、どうなんだよ。これでルート確保ってことでいいのか？
場所は分かったが、こりゃルート確保とは言えないかもな。
We are finally in the final stretch of this palace. They have also made, again, significant changes to this area as well. Much more noticeable than what was shown with Madarame. Sorry, with Kamoshida's. Go ahead and check the items here. Again, mostly avoiding them where I can. I do like using the sort of combat utility items because they do feel tangibly rewarding when using them successfully. But HP and FP items feel less so. Albeit the HP items feel more significant now, just because of the limitations I'm placing on myself with the use of SP items. Yeah, I think this game, albeit I will say, is great for casual players and hardcore players alike because of the different ways you can tackle it and the way that it's overall balanced to a pretty astonishingly positive degree. Which is kind of remarkable given the many different ways that you can actually break this game. I've watched someone that by the time they were who was currently roughly about 200 hours into the game, probably about 50% of the way through it, but has found a way to ultimately beat the game solo with max stat characters with unbelievably insanely powerful options available to them. And, you know, that is a valid way to go about this, just becoming an unmitigated power trip. Here we finally get Kaguya, which, yes, you can just access through regular fusion. If you unlock the DLC, I believe, from what someone has told me, if you unlock the DLCs, they then become a part of your selective compendium, so you can fuse them naturally through this process. You can still decide to just not use them. I personally felt like once I could get them naturally, they were within a reasonable means to use them. They're not so overpowered as to negate the challenge of the game. Some of them are a bit ridiculous, and I'll probably avoid using. Stuff like Orpheus having the ability to basically avoid you KOing like 4 times in a game is kind of ridiculous. Unless, and this is why I bring this up, unless you're doing a one character run. If you are just playing with just Joker through the whole game, then suddenly that power becomes effectively essential for getting through the early parts of the game, where normally you would be otherwise kind of at a loss for the ability to do anything. Which is interesting, because then it gets you thinking about how do you go about some challenges which would otherwise be unconquerable in other circumstances. For example, how would you get through Kamoshida's boss fight without access to the ability to send someone away to get the crown? The answer is, you just fight him as he is. You take all of the damage that he can throw at you, and you just consist through that. I have thought about doing not something quite as dramatic as that, but doing, say, a three-person party or 2-person party run of this game the next time I go through for New Game Plus, or something to that effect. Because if I'm already doing an SP itemless run here, I'm wondering what I can do for the next time I go around, because I am interested in talking more about this game in a more spoilery activity, because there's many things that I noticed at the beginning of the game that allude to things much later on that, because of the format of this series, I can't really touch on. And making callbacks from what will likely be 6 months from now will be incredibly hard to like dictate and keep notes on, and be ready to like fish up that footage again. Because guys, I have a lot of footage. Like I have for this game like probably 30 hours of footage broken into 50 days now. There is a lot of things to sort through when it comes to doing a series, and it's why, despite wanting to do more editing for it and wanting to be a bit more dramatic and a bit more open to that, there really just isn't room for it. And so this had to, by its own very nature, be a lot more chilled, a lot more relaxed of a format, while still trying my best to collect as many notes and become as informative as I can in the presentation of it. And so I hope you guys are enjoying it. I kind of good days and bad days with it. There are some days where it feels like it's a routine, but other days when I get to really learn a lot more. Like, it's gotten me more so looking up articles from Japan and staying more informed about current events, thinking about the inspirations of this game and looking more into how to explain what I appreciate about it, allowing me to be more critical about what I'm seeing in front of me. Really, it's given me an opportunity to slow down and take this game at a pace that is honestly a bit more satisfying, because having already poured something like 300 hours into the original game of this, going through this whole story again at the pace that it has can be a bit taxing at times, because I am someone who, I like a game that's long and has a lot of story to it, but once I finished it, it's hard for me to just do it again. I didn't used to be that case, mind you. Like, when I was a kid, I finished the first Kingdom Hearts game more than 20 times, and I'm not exaggerating. I have put more time to that game than possibly any other game ever. I think. No, that in Smash. I have put the original Smash Brothers Melee Brawl included. I have probably put thousands of hours into, possibly 4,000 hours in that game over the course of 10 to 13 years of playing the series. And I've definitely not put that much time into Ultimate or 4 just because I became a much busier person as I started growing up. You know, that's kind of what happens, but you know, growing up, like, that's just what you did. And I really wish I had discovered this series much earlier than I did, because I think that would have been perfect. Persona 3 would have been the kind of game that at 16-year-old I would have been obsessed with. And it would have driven me crazy because of how often you have to, how like particular it is about, like, you, to get everything in that game, you have to work so hard. It is a much harder game to play through as an adult than it is as a kid. 5 is thankfully a lot more relaxed in that way, and yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, the rest of the Persona series is something that I would have loved earlier on, but Persona 5, you know, even Persona 5 with its more relaxed nature is still something I can engage with, but getting to I don't know. Getting to engage with this at a much slower pace where, you know, a lot of people I know are either like 70% way through this game or who finished it like a month ago. I am taking my time with it because I already know most of what this story is, what this story needs to be. Now it's a question of how do I take this in a way that is meaningful to me? And this is the way I've done it. You know, I spend maybe 4 to 6 hours a week playing this, sometimes much longer. When we have Palace days, we have just long segments. And then I spend 2 hours a day thinking, talking, and editing my thoughts about this game. And that by itself can be pretty taxing. And honestly, I come back to it every week being like, I want to play more, you know. But like, I play Thursday to Friday in game, and then I cut myself off because ultimately, like, and that's retained the sense of like I have something to keep coming back to, and I get a real sense of like this started, like the sense of how much time these characters are actually spending with each individual day. It's incredibly rewarding, and wow, I spent a lot of time in the Velvet Room there, didn't I? This is what this game is, though. It's a lot of small things working in conjunction together that create an overall experience that is wildly addicting, with a style and a presentation that exceeds the expectations that you came in with it. Especially given their focus on making this a much starker and a much more, like, previously they had a lot of subcolors to add accents and add the range of how everything was presented in the UI, but this time, with the inclusion of red as their primary, they wanted everything to come back to that color. So what you have instead of a lot of like accents and a lot of variation in the coloration, like you saw in Persona 4, is instead you get these much starker, stronger shapes with outlines and this very dramatic, more stylized feature. But yeah, back to Manorame, of course. We're trying to figure out how to get in, trying to set up our routes, and this is probably the most, like, essentially Phantom Thief thing that we could be doing thus far in the game. Robbing a museum. Like, there's something of that character that you just have to appreciate. How committed they are to the aesthetic of this game. That we are a bunch of outlaw ruffians robbing the evil museum owner of his valuable artwork. Stealing back what is ultimately rightfully ours. Anyway, I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Have you guys been playing Persona 5, the Royal? And if so, like, what do you think of it so far? Have you heard about Persona 5 Scramble? And are you looking forward to that as well? That actually came out in Japan recently or so, I believe. It was mentioned back in February. I believe it came out last month in Japan. Whether or not I'll be picking that up, I probably won't be picking that up anytime soon. I do want to finish Royal before I go into Scramble, which means I'll probably be starting Scramble next year, which is saying something. Because I get the feeling Scramble might actually be a continuation of Persona 5 Royal instead of Persona 5. And that is an assumption based on nothing but speculation at the moment. Though it is the new character, because as far as I know, the story of Scramble is canonical to this game, whereas the vague continuity of all of the side games like Persona Q are much more in the up in the air of like in between worlds fuckery where fan service characters meet together and then forget the happenings afterwards. From what I've heard, the Persona 5 Scramble is more of a genuine continuity. Same worlds, no sort of goofy fuckery with that. Which definitely has me curious. I might watch someone else play it once it comes out stateside, like bits and pieces, but hey, we finally get follow-up to activate. Such a stylish interconnection there. Awesome. As we get more and more follow-ups available for each of our party members, you'll definitely be seeing those more often. I have yet to actually encounter the Showtime feature, and so I'm very curious to see how those unlock in this game. I haven't looked up much outside of where I'm at right now in terms of like fun facts about characters that were relevant beforehand. I certainly looked at the art book for this game, but that actually hasn't told me anything that I didn't actually know yet. It is surprisingly lacking spoilers in this context, which is fascinating to me, because I'm wondering what it's holding back from me if that is the case. Which, I don't know. My art book is currently locked in the office where I can't get to it for the next few days, so we'll find out together at some point, for sure. And pause in the video.
標的だ。正面から戦うのは得策じゃないぞ。
サメの渦めそこか。
おお、ジョーカーズクイーン。
よろしく。
バトンタッチヘルサに追撃だ。踊れカルメン。パンダ逃走。頼んだな。
任せてけって。キャプテンキッド。
カールやるじゃないか。
バカな真似はしないことだ。やれやれ。
暗そうなやつだ。意見を押し付けるのはよそうぜ。
そうだ、弱い人間。そうだ、我は汝は我。
相変わらずすげえ力だな、ジョーカ
よし。
ー。この感じ。セーフルームがあるかも。
つけておこう。
さあ行くぞ。
Okay. That little door bothering the heck out of me. Find out, okay, we have a grappling hook going, that's good. The reincorporation of the hook into the scene is really great. You'll see how that comes back later. Really awesome to see that.
正体を見せろ。
Actually curious doing a also no hiding mechanic run of this game too. So never using the actual like cover. I've been thinking about, I always think about like little challenges I can do with games. Just as a way of like making greater use of the mechanics they give you. One example is, you know, I play a lot of Devil May Cry, and so trying to do no devil trigger, no health upgrades, contributing to an item. You can actually, fun fact, beat the game, beat all of Dante's levels with no weapons as long as you have royal cards. It can be unbelievably tedious, however, you can do it. You can beat Virgil with just royal card. However, it might be a better option to simply do, I don't know, I've thought about like only guns, an only guns run with Dante. Stuff like that. That's not relevant to this game, but you know, it kind of is too. I appreciate how much there is a versatility to the way that you can approach this game with the sheer amount of stuff they throw at you. Like, that's really... that SP, man. It's so much SP from that, it's crazy. And I think it's percentage-based too, so it's not just like a flat 30-ish amount. It's like a quarter of your SP you get back as long as you're level. Which means later on in the game that can be significantly more clutch. Okay. With the way we're doing this right now, I think that'll be cool. Splash screens are so great.
早速使わないとね。
よし。手応えねえな。研ぎ澄ませ。
Here we go. We are at the climax of this day with the reveal of how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna pull this off? Keep thinking about how they get from one stage room to the next in this. Yeah, but like I said, as I mentioned, the reincorporation of this hook as the grappling point.
やれやれ。
Also, just to bring back Goemon for a second, in a sort of morbid sense of humor, I suppose, there's actually these Japanese bathtubs that are like large, like iron kettles, and they're called Goemon Buro, which is a Goemon bath, which again, he was boiled alive. So that's a bit fucked up, but I'm not here to judge, am I?
ちょっと。
Oh man. And just wait how they put that into practice. You might be curious when we're gonna be going in to tackle this again. You were right to be curious.
いいぞ。
We will talk about the week ahead starting on Sunday. So Saturday will always be, will hopefully always be a bit of a surprise, but Sunday will be.
いいか。
感じるぞ。
Anyway, so I guess the last thing we need to do is figure out how to find that will seed. This will be our only opportunity to grab it, so to avoid having any regrets, we gotta take it out while we can. I remember I was hearing the sparkling and having been reminded by Morgana earlier in it, drove me crazy, running around in circles for a bit to try and find it. And I really do love the inclusion of the grappling hook into this. It's really simple and something I wouldn't consider much in terms of praiseworthy outside of the context of a RPG like this. But I think in terms of recovering what things it struggles with in terms of its genre, I think it does a good job of mixing that sense of scale with the turn-by-turn combat that it incorporates. But not only that, but also making its turn-by-turn combat feel like turn-based combat feel a lot more like full of action and rhythm. And it's something I mentioned much earlier on to the series, how Persona 5 can sometimes feel like a fighting game in its own right, because every action has an animation to it that cycles into the next animation. So everything feels like one fluid motion drawing from the next to another. Hitting a weakness in the baton passing, and hitting a weakness in baton passing. And then buffing. And then like doing everything else in the combat. Strings together all together until that final hit, which is climaxed with the all-out attack. Everything works up into this one final moment where there is just a blast of energy that's finally the release of the whole dance. And it is in that, methodology that you start to see why this game is so engrossing. And why its pacing problems can be genuinely such a letdown for a lot of people who try to re-experience this. Because sometimes its pace feels so smooth, and other times it just feels absent. The concept of pacing just exited everyone's mind, and frankly it's simply a problem of the way it's constructed. There are simply times when I completely miss. I saw it right now, but I miss. Do you see it right there? Saw it the second time. That is the last of our legal block picks. The rest of them are illegal. We're not going to use them. So stay strong to our beliefs. I was kind of deciding who would benefit off this most, and eventually decided that I would keep it for myself. I actually still have a lot of clothes that I need to get cleaned from, city dirty clothes that we got from enemy drops that we haven't taken to laundromat to turn into real equipment. But I am waiting for something a little bit later after this palace to start doing that, because there is a way for us to do it without wasting any time at all, which is preferable. And right now, we're really not suffering in terms of what we have available to us. Yeah, looking at it right now, it's really surprising just how many resources we still have available to us. Look at all of this. Good SP, and then so many SP items, so many health items. Yeah, some strong personas. Only gonna get stronger too. Yeah, a lot of money. This game can be exceedingly generous, and albeit part of the problem too is the matter of how much money I got to start with because of the DLC problems. But that is something I also I want to address later on as well. There's about, was it 150,000 yen that I need to obfuscate from the beginning of this game to really test my screen here. This guy actually caused me a bit of difficulty, as you'll probably see in a second, particularly because of one stage effect that is just infuriating to encounter, which is brainwash, which is like confusion, except more violent. Albeit confusion is by far my least favorite one, but brainwash can set you back so much in terms of progress in this game. And you will see very, very soon why. Primarily I set up to just make sure he doesn't immediately flatten me, and thank God, because wow, did he do quite a number on us immediately. Get a really lucky proc on Morgana. Try to get the hit on him, but unfortunately he is immune. Either he is immune to that or he's immune to physical attacks. I'm not actually sure. We're just gonna get the damage on him right now. Okay, sure. By the way, the main boss here is actually itself a reference to museums. The design of this character is based off of pottery from pre-imperialist Japan, sort of the ancient era of Japan before civilization really started to set together, when the Ainu, the native people of Japan, were there, were the dominant race of people there. Japanese, for the most part, are actually very old immigrants to the island that is now known as Japan. Previously, there was a land bridge connected to China and Korea and Russia. They extended across the Ring of Fire, which is, if you don't know, the area where a bunch of volcanoes are in that ocean. And yeah, immigrated into that country. Inevitably displacing the natives of that island, who still have a living culture to this day. The Ainu are, albeit like Native Americans and indigenous people in Australia and, the like, are represented, but also are definitely unrepresented, and are a prejudiced group here. But yes, this character, just to stay on topic, is a depiction of the pottery that was usually used back then. Here we have Brainjack, which hits multiple characters here. It's such a pain in the ass. There we go, healing him by 1/4 of his health. Wow, that's the worst. Wow, I hate it. So I check around, see if I have anything to actually delete brainwash from my characters here. Sadly, I do not think I do. The reason why I hate confusion, though, more than I hate brainwash, is because confusion, your party members can randomly decide to they can randomly decide to throw away your money, and a lot of it too, and it's so frustrating. I can't stand it. Right now, just looking for anything I can use to get rid of brainwash. Sadly, nothing. A lot of things to deal with hunger, a lot of things to deal with sleep and whatnot, but no brainwash. Because there are just too many status effects in this game. Holy cow. So I decided to be the appropriate level of petty. That's gonna do extra damage to Ryuji. Thankfully, Morgana's going to get missed by that. He's sadly gonna get brainwashed, but gets immediately healed by the confidant effect that we got from Mizuki, which makes that confidant, I swear, so unbegottenly essential. Thankfully, brainwash only lasts for 1 turn anyhow now, which is great until last 3 turns, and god could that ruin your day. Really, that 1 turn is enough to feel pain. Just keeping extended so I don't see it drop when maximizing the damage I have. I can't wait to have Matarukunda? Matarukunda. God, I do not speak Hindu well. All these names are based off like the Hindu words for these different things, and it is confusing because it's like the only game that I think uses this naming scheme whatsoever. Which is fascinating. It's like either Hindu or connected to Buddhist, like language used to describe Buddhist concepts. I'm not sure. Not a particular specialty of mine. we do see now that Pilimpa actually has been added to Morgana's list, making him even more like effective of a tool for us, especially when it comes to potentially chaining together memento spawns. And now we have the final thing we needed from this palace. We get our new accessory. Palace of Vanity has an amazing ability that literally all it does is nullify weaknesses. That's all it does. That is such a big deal because we are going to have very, very soon Shikioji. Which Shikioji, like I said previously, already nullifies physical attacks, gun attacks, light attacks, and dark attacks, but is weak to nuke. But now, he's not weak to nuke. So now instead what we have is 4 enormous like abilities to completely just mitigate damage entirely with a persona that already has a good set of abilities, and the ability to get a lot of new abilities simply through the mechanics that are given to us as we progress through the game. And because of the way this game is set up, we can keep Shikioji, if we want to, indefinitely. If I end up doing that, I'm not sure. I'll definitely be experimenting a lot as I go through the game. So sticking with one thing for a long time isn't really my style. Yeah. But after this, we are going to make a quick cut for grinding. Right here though, I wanted to make sure to put this in while I was grinding. An event popped up. Oh, as soon as I went back to the Velvet Room. You'll see the little glitch I get from my current capture. Switching to the Elgato soon, I promise, so it'll be looking a lot nicer, too. I'm looking forward to, personally. Yeah, so now we can also convert personas into powerful items. And a restriction I will place on myself is that I will not change the DLC characters into items, because holy crap, are their items busted. They are busted. It's something I might consider for like my single character runs and stuff like that. But with all the resources we have available to us right now, I don't think it's necessary in the slightest. Yes. Getting Frey right here just means that we can quickly cut over to doing our confidant with the girls, Justine and Caroline. And frankly, it's on make a pass here. I'm not sure if we had a card previously in our inventory. I honestly wasn't paying a whole lot of attention in that regard. I don't believe we had any black garbs with us, so I don't think it's legal for us to use that just yet. It is kind of insane how powerful Jack Frost's item though, if that is the case. Just because, like, why? It might be just because getting the black robe this early on is fairly unlikely. But seriously, repel physical high? That's a big deal. That's reflecting a potentially like destructive attack. 110, which I believe is about 40 higher than what he currently has, and 20 extra SP, which is great. But yeah, I do end up using one of the black rocks that I actually did earn appropriately
to create the grunge ring, because having the extra versatility there I thought would be a huge boon in the future. Getting one of each of these like the elemental items, I think is significant in that regard. I thought really long and hard about getting that, but like ultimately I don't think I had those items fairly, so just considering them a pass. Again, we get the recognition that no one else can seem to actually notice the Velvet Room. And oh yeah, I forgot when I did that to actually re-talk to Caroline and Justine. So I will just leave you to this wonderful of a cutscene with them. And yeah, I'll see you again once it's over.
Ah. Oi, 囚人!
The relationship with Igor that they have is interesting to me. Again, referencing the fact that this is unique to the way that the relationship was presented in previous games, where they work more as equals. Now it seems as if Igor has taken a much higher authority when it comes to this, much higher position when it comes to their position. While they were in fact his assistant, he never really called. The idea of him being their master, I think, is new to this game. As I believe I mentioned before, the master of this, the master of the Velvet Room is actually Philemon, who is a character we have not actually seen in the series since Persona 2 was around, as well as the pair that are singing and playing this song in the Velvet Room, which were originally characters that you could interact with in the Velvet Room. And the next one we need is Flores Terukaja, which is going to be one of our multi-persona fusions, which now thankfully now you can just purchase outright. So essentially how it works is just as long as you have them in your compendium, while you do have to pay to produce them from your compendium, you don't have to buy all them from the compendium and make 3 slots. As long as you have 1 slot available for each for the final summon, that is sufficient. Which is fantastic. It just makes it a lot more efficient. And time for a montage. Oh, hey, and here is another scene. Because now we have access to Flores. Ooh. Just look at the design, man.
引き継ぐ技能を選びなさい。
新たな力を授けなるほ
Please enjoy confirmation that yes, we can in fact get multiple ranks in a single day for this confidant.
あら、ほう、確かに。やればできるではないか。ええ。へへん。もう。はあ？ふん。
Plot continues to thicken. Who is it indeed that wrote this list? We have a few examples that we do know. Well, not too many actually. As I mentioned, Philemon is the true master of this area, so maybe he could have potentially done so. It seems to have been implied that Igor was not the one to write it.
うるさい。おい囚人。ええ。
Lockdown is going to give us the ability to give extra resistances to our personas, but also be able to improve their base stats as well. This will be really important for if we want to keep personas beyond their beyond the point where they're gaining new abilities and whatnot, but also to
deal with their otherwise, at times, crippling weaknesses, such as really strong ones like black slime that have a lot of innate weaknesses. For now, we will be using the Crystal of Vanity, which, you know, gets rid of, nullifies weaknesses entirely, which is still pretty fucking insane. Yeah, we don't currently have any sort of access to Phoenix right now, so that will just have to go on the chopping block for now. I do not believe that having an item attached to you does anything for these, by the way, so you can't just have the item that has counter on it and have Phoenix and for that to be sufficient enough.
つけておこう。
時間です、囚人。
Here we get later on into my grinding. I got to level 20. Typically for each dungeon it suggested you be 10 levels by 10 levels, so at the end of last dungeon we were level 10, now we're level 20. End of next dungeon we will probably level 30. We get another one of the DLC personas. Yeah, we are finally finished. For you it was about 2 hours or so. For me it was 5 to 6 hours. Grinding is really what took the most time, but here we get to see.
Yes! そうね。
That is always satisfying to see.
Oh, 帰ったか。
よーし。
That will be really us rounding out to the end of this day. I want to thank everyone who has stuck around through until the end of this. I hope you had a good time, chill time, relaxing with me, and boy Griffin over here, who has been hassling me through the entire recording. Yeah, it was fun. I had a lot of fun with this. I had a lot of fun with this day. The grinding certainly took me a hot minute, but you know, it's nice. The Persona Fusion system is really a lot of fun too. And having my time restrictions does certainly make me consider my options a lot more thoroughly. Well, not thoroughly, but being a lot more considerate of my options. With what time I have available to me. On television we have them re-presenting their Super Sentai guys, the Phoenix Rangers, who are actually from what I've been told, referenced in the previous games as well. The Phoenix Rangers are a long-standing set of characters in the Persona franchise, at least since 3. Anyway, we're going to catch up on our reading, and then that'll be it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, we will return again tomorrow at 9 a.m. So, take care, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you tomorrow. Bye-bye.